same story of where we are coming from, and to lift your the tension off your heart and mind, and so that you can reminiscent. So we talk about surviving in the old country in the previous tape, another tape. But today, what we're going to talk about to remind you of the old country is building our homes, our houses. Not homes, but houses, really. Homes, it's a different topic. But the first time I realized, I tell it back in the 1950s, Ship the Explorer, suddenly became aware that the house I was living in is made out of somewhat wood. I can remember now. It's tongue and groove wood, and it had 1, 2, 3 rooms, and it had a little kitchen and living and dining in the front, and the veranda that wrapped around almost half of the house. So when you think about that, I think if I compare that to now and others, eventually I'm going to say that I probably grew up in a middle class household where it seems like my grandparents were doing fairly well. My grandfather was a shoemaker, one of the best shoemaker in West Rural St. Andrew. Mass Derry, I tell you. And some of you can reminisce with that. And make some of the dress shoes and some working shoes. The dress shoes, they were round mouth and black and leather outside and leather sole and all that. And the working shoes was also leather with thick layers of built up layers of the shoe, the sole of the shoe. And then he would tuck some kind of a metal metal semi-ring to match the shoe bottom, and I can only safely say that it's probably like something like a horse shoe. But when you walk in that hard working shoe, man, and you drag along the gravel road, you hear crop, 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 but when you go to the field and you stand onto the 45-degree angle hillside in St. Andrew, and you plant your left foot or your right foot in the back, and you plant the other foot in the front, and you grab your hoe and you start to dig, or you take your cutlass or your machete, you start to weed that plantain or banana field or coffee field or cocoa chocolate field. You're not gonna slide, because Mass Derry shoes was holding you strong. But Shippy the Explorer, we're going to talk about today's house. It's a house. Once I remember the wooden house, and I can only describe it that it had an upper level, so the footings were high, maybe 3-4 feet off the ground, and underneath that house, between the posts that kept up the flooring, were a cellar. You call it under the cellar. And under the cellar we would store dried coconuts and wood. And the chickens were also underneath there on late at night sleeping. Dogs, when they didn't want to guard the house, they were underneath there also. The laying hens were also underneath, they're laying their eggs in the dark. And every time they take them, they creep out and they walk up the street or something. That's when they start to cattle. Not, yeah, chicken cattle, yeah. Or make noise that they had laid their eggs. So you have to retract their their steps to find the egg underneath the cellar. So that my recollection of that house was wood. I think it had zinc roof, but lovely house with the veranda, as I said, and part of it was built out of concrete. And the kitchen was made out of something that is after when we were knocking that whole house down, I realized that kitchen was special because while the main part of the house was wood and tongue and groove, and flooring was in wood also, the kitchen was made out of something called wattle and daub. So you would build a framework, and in the framework you would wattle some other wood in between the main posts like this, and then you would run barbed wire criss and cross the intersection of that wattle. And then what you would do is you would daub on the clay, the wet clay, and you daub it and smooth it in, and then you have a smooth dirt filled wall. And when that dry, it's strong as ever and smooth as a baby's skin. But on top of that, I think we had the ability to buy some concrete, not concrete, but sand and cement, and we would sieve the cement and make it fine, and then we would daub over the clay a fine layer of mortar. And when that dried, then your house, the kitchen, was looking like a brand new, something different from the rest of the house. But I remember that, so that was one type of house. And then at that time in the 1950s, other people were making block homes where you would dig the foundation and lay the concrete foundation, and you lay your blocks, and then in between you would put your wires, steel, and you build the walls up out of block. But some people in those old days could not afford. And what we're going to describe today is the other types of homes that I came across in the 1950s as a child. And I remember being surprised. One day I ventured into the back bushes, and when I reached down to another property, I went I was invited into this house, and the walls were wattle and daub. It was the same bamboo posts and wattled bamboo strips. And but guess what? The walls weren't covered in mud. So that's a different type of construction that some people lived in. And the roof was thatched. Bamboo leaves were layered in such a way that when the wind and the rain came, it would just flow off. And in between that, you would sometimes use grass, long stretch of glass tied in certain bungles, and you also call it, so we call that thatch roof. And so the roof was thatched, the wall was bamboo posts and wattled, And guess what? The floor was solid dirt. Yes, in the 50s, some people were still living in homes, houses that had dirt floor. Dirt floor and wackled walls, thatch roof, and that. But you go through the door, the opening, and enter, and that house was cool as cucumber, as you say. Yes, I've seen that, old enough to remember that. And some of you can remember, you probably grew up in that type of housing. But we're moving from middle class, somewhat middle class, and I'm describing that you move down to maybe a poorer set of people in the society, and then you move into another type of housing. You call those huts. And these are people who were at the bottom extreme economical level of the society. And the huts were similar to the thatch roof homes, but just wackled bamboo posts or guava post, and in between it was wackled bamboo bits. The roof were thatched roof, because you had the thatch means you tie the grass, the long stretched strands of grass, you dry them, and you lay them layer by layer across the rooftop. And those huts, believe it or not, another group of family, another layer of economical deprived people. Well, they say deprived, you're poorer stage. You're not deprived because you're living. These people manage to live in their huts. And inside the huts they had their single bed. The bed was probably made up of same rose apple wood, and for the big posts, and then you put the sticks across, and then you get the crocus bag or the flour bag from the stores or hardware stores. And what do you put in those bags? You probably sometimes open the bag and make a bigger bag to match the bed. And how do you make, what did they do to make the mattress? They go to the bushes also and they cut the air grass. We call it air grass because it's finer string grass. And you dry them. And you stuff those bags, that big bag, until it is fairly stiff with that grass. And you sew it up. And that's your mattress. And if you're able to if you want a better mattress, then you take the same bag, crocus bag or flour bag, and you sew it into a bigger mat to match the bed. And you take the inner core, the soft inner core fiber of the coconut husk, and you thrash it out. And just use that to stuff the bag until it is filled. And that's your mattress. And what you have in the house now is for lighting, where candles, maybe candles are, or if you can afford it, is the kerosene lamp. And if you can't afford the kerosene lamp with the home sweet home shade around it, then you can have a lantern. And if you can't afford the lantern, what do? You get a bottle or beer bottle and you pour the kerosene into the bottle and you wring a cloth or a piece of paper tight, and a long piece of paper, maybe 6 inches long, and you stuff it into the kerosene, the top of the bottle, and you make a wick, and you shake it, and the kerosene comes up through the paper, and that's what you light for your that's what your lamp you light to get your light, and you call that buckle torch, and that's way to get light. But that hut or thatch roof house did not have interior bath, toilet or anything like that. The toilet was out on the ridge side, with a hole dug in the ground, with another set of wackled walls, and the door entrance was covered with a tack of sugar bag cloth that was split the sugar bag. And you don't use flour bags to make the doors, because if the wind is blowing that is too light, you use the crocus bag, the one that the sugar comes in, and you cut that and you tack it on the top of the door, on the lintel of the door, and it hangs down, and then that's the door for the toilet. And you don't bring it straight down to the flooring of the toilet. You leave a little, maybe a foot gap, because if somebody is coming up to the toilet, they want to know if it's occupied or unoccupied. So that's your outside toilet. And in the old days, I suspect that the toilet seat, they didn't have toilet seat, it was probably a hole in the ground. But in the 50s, when I was growing up, I can remember that the toilet hole was covered, whether with strong sticks for forming the foundation, and on top of that they put cross sticks, smaller cross sticks, and then they would probably put the dirt and slab the dirt over, and in the center of that they would make a hole with a box-like seat, and then that's what you sit on to make the toilet. But the toilet hole was deep enough. If it was soft soil, it was down 12 feet, 10 feet, 12 feet. If it's on harder soil, sometimes it is just down 8 feet or so, 6 to 8 feet. And every so often that toilet would, you would use it for maybe 10, 12, 15 years, if it can go 15 years, because by the time the 15th year or 12th year, it started getting fuller of feces, and it started to smell, and sometimes the material that is used to make the flooring is getting rotted and getting dangerous. So if you go into that toilet sometime to use it, it may just collapse with you. And there's a good story, and the man is dead now, so we're from West Road, St. Andrew. We have this man called To my neck. His family may be mad with me, but it's the story that he's called to my neck because of special reasons. He went into one of those outer toilets in the back old days, and guess what? The flooring, I think, collapsed with him. He fell in, and nobody knew where he was for a short time, for some time. And he was down there calling. He fell he was there. He explained that after a while, when they found him, they found that he was sunk in the feces. And when he finally called out for help, and somebody finally heard him, and they came rushing and looked and said, yeah, I don't remember his name, it's like you said, Joe, how far are you then? He says, to me neck, to me neck. That means he was down in the feces to his neck. It's a gross description, but it's a true story. And they must have gotten rope and all sorts of things and let down into the toilet and rescued him. And until the day he died, nobody knew his real name. His name was a nickname, was called Tuminik. So that's we're talking about housing on this tape. Housing in the old days. The material was probably just procured from the hillside, the wood, and then you need to buy some nails and put this thing together. Thatch roof, wattle and daub walls. But that was how people lived. And the kitchen in those days were outer kitchen. And as much as you see some of the tapes in Africa where we have the outer stones, 3 stones, and the 3-foot pot just cooking along there, and you're cooking on the open fire. In the West Rural St. Andrew area, we had outer kitchens to a certain extent, and those kitchens were also made with wattle and daub. Walls were made with wattle and daub bamboos or sticks, and thatch roof, and with grass or coconut boughs, and if you can afford it, maybe a zinc, corrugated zinc. But on the raised heart, you would put a platform and you put some sticks across to reinforce the flooring, and on top of those reinforced wood, you would lay a layer of clay and build that up with clay and stone, and that's your cooking platform. And on top of that platform now, you have, if it's a big kitchen, you have 3 stones in one side of the platform and 3 stones on the other to the left. 3 stones to the left, and 3 stones to the right. And in between those stones, you would put your wood and light your fire. And on top of those stones, you would put your dutchie pot or your frying pan, your zinc pan, and that's where you would cook. So that's the way it was in the old days. Thatch roof, wattle and daub walls, solid dirt clay floors, and then if you're richer, you had the tongue and groove boards, zinc roof, wattle and daub, sometimes wattle and daub with reinforced with mortar or concrete walls, and hardwood floors. And then leading up to the house was the concrete steps. Well, in the old days, you would probably have wooden steps, but after a while, they had, if the only thing they had in concrete in the old days was sometimes part of the foundation and the concrete steps. Because you would often see after a storm comes through, and, well, we call it storm or hurricane, or somebody moved from the location, the storm would blow the house down and they moved to another location. Or the house, somebody would die and leave these wooden or thatch houses, and they would deteriorate. And often what remains is a concrete step. 2 or 3 concrete steps leading up into the chocolate walk. And I'm talking from experience because I remember my 2 steps, concrete steps, just in the midst of the coffee field, just standing there with its lonesome self. And when we'd ask, what's that? What was that for? That's where the original house was? And the old people would remember and they say, yes, that's where the great house was. And sometimes, yeah, those steps are the only remaining thing that you'd see. And sometimes, if the persons are rich enough, we would have a concrete floor. And sometimes you see the concrete still embedded in the fields or the tile floors. It's so they're almost like Pompeii in Rome, in Italy. Pompeii, if you look up Pompeii, where you see that volcanic eruption came in, and suddenly the dust and the hot ash killed thousands of people that one day. And hundreds of years after, the excavation is showing that some of those homes had marble floors or tile floors and all that. So, I'm bringing you back to the old days of the gold. The olden days were golden days. And living in those homes, folks were folks with intention and religious thought and religious actions, and they prayed, they worshiped, they loved, they had their babies, and they raised them, they planted their field, and I think there was a sense of happiness in those days. Poorness, but happiness. Because what you had around you was fresh air, breeze, sunshine, a lot of times. And sometimes you were also poor. Sometimes the parents did not know where the next meal is coming from. But there was a sense of freedom to a certain extent. So that's, we talk about housing. And we compare those homes now with elaborate steel structures and glass doors and glass windows and air conditioning and light, electrical lights running through every sections of the house. And we have running water, we have hot and cold water coming from our pipes. And we have electrical conduits or computer conduits where you can plug your computers. And you have vacuum access where you just plug your vacuum in and you can just move with your small equipment from room to room, where you don't have to carry the vacuum with you. Central vacuum. And you have central air and central HVAC. And in 50, 60, 70 years, we have come a long way, where we have moved from the huts and the thatch roof homes and the Wackland daub and the tongue and groove boards to a somewhat structured homes with concrete floors and concrete foundations and walls and sturdy roof. But I'm telling you, sometimes we have the drawbacks, the tornadoes or the hurricanes, the floods that come through. in these developed societies and destroy these homes. The earthquakes also. And some of those homes, especially the tongue and groove homes in the whole country, because they were made of wood. Earthquake and tornadoes, not tornadoes, but earthquakes and hurricanes sometimes blow over them and not damage to a great extent. So, Shipping Explorer is just bringing your mind back to the old days. And if you did not know those things were happening in the old days, then Shipping Explorer is here to inform you of what it was, how it was, and why it was in those days. So, share these stories or this bit of history, and tell your friend and yourself to subscribe to Shippity Explorer, because he is bringing you stories and facts from different angles. So, next time we talk about maybe life, raising the kids, the family, whether small or big, in the olden days. And the big question you want to think about was why Granny had to have 10 or 12 kids. See you. Shippity. Take care. Walk good. Till we talk again.